this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is a video to compare the HyperX Quadcast with the Roccat Torch. Now in this video I'm going to be showing you the Quadcast S and talking about the differences between that and the Roccat Torch. But the original Quadcast is also the same in terms of the audio capture, it just has some minor differences in terms of RGB. But I'll link to a video I did comparing the S and the Quadcast in the description. In this video though, I'm going to be talking to you about the differences between the two microphones and obviously doing a mic test at the end. I'm using one of the microphones right now, so see if you can guess in the comments before you get to the end which microphone I'm using currently. But here I'm going to talk about the differences between these two mics, what they're like to use, and the features and more. Now you can see them side by side here, and you'll see that the Roccat Torch sits quite a bit lower on the desk than the HyperX Quadcast. Now it's worth noting that both these microphones support boom arms, and I'll show you that later on as well, and they both sound better when you get them on a boom arm. They both have RGB lighting, which is useful in different ways as well, so more on that in a minute. And they are both very nice microphones with excellent capture quality and a number of really interesting features that make them stand apart, but also worth considering because of them. You'll notice that the Quadcast has that wonderful shock mounting system on it, which is a really nice highlight of it, and the Torch has its own features that include multiple selections for different polar patterns, and you can see that the Quadcast also has 4 polar patterns as well. That has stereo, omnidirectional, cardioid and bidirectional, but the Torch has a whisper mode, which I'll show you what that means later on, that makes it particularly interesting. Now you can take both of these microphones off their stands to make them boom arm mountable, and it's really easy to do, but you can see it's slightly different. The Torch just comes off the base and then it'll just screw into your boom arm, whereas the Quadcast needs removing from its stand, and it's also very important that you're careful not to lose the parts that come with the Quadcast in the process of doing that. You'll notice as well that both of them use a USB-C connection, so they have USB-C cables plugged into them, and they both have 3.5mm jacks as well. So you can see already quite a few comparable features in terms of what they offer. Now, the Quadcast S is a solid favourite with many people, as was the original Quadcast, and that's because it has a wonderful capture quality, but it's also very feature-rich. You can see that you have the easy polar pattern selector on the back, and that makes it very straightforward, but also has a number of other really interesting highlights to it. The Torch, though, shouldn't be dismissed because it too has a number of interesting options on it. You can see multiple things, including RGB light adjustment. You have a gain slider, various different polar patterns on it as well. That includes cardioid, stereo, and whisper mode. And they both offer up to 20,000 Hz frequency response. Though it's worth noting that the Torch has 24-bit 48 kHz sample bitrate as well, whereas the Quadcast goes up to 16-bit 48 kHz sample rate and bitrate. So slight differences in the specs, and I'll leave all the specs in the description. Now I'll look at the RGB lighting. I said already that both offer RGB lighting, but for different reasons. And on the Roccat Torch it's interesting because the colour of the RGB, which you can see down the edges and on the Roccat logo, changes depending on what polar pattern you're on. So if you switch between the different modes, you'll see a different colour for each, which means that you can see at a glance what mode you're on. You'll also notice that when you adjust the gain up and down, it changes where the light is on the microphone. So you can see at a glance what sort of gain levels you're on easily and know how high the microphone is capturing, which is pretty cool. It also shines on both sides of the microphone, which means that if you're streaming and you have it on a boom arm, then your audience will be able to see that, which is pretty nifty. So it has a number of interesting highlights in the RGB there. Also, this microphone has an interesting design in terms of its mic mute capabilities. So there's a little sensor on top, which you essentially wave your hand over the top of, and then it will mute it, and the light will change to red to let you know that that has happened. You'll also notice that there's an indicator on the bottom at the front of the bass which changes between live and a red mute when it's muted. So you can see there's a little indicator down there, another highlight to let you know when it's muted. And the thing of interest here is that you can also adjust the brightness of the RGB lighting and turn it off completely. So you have multiple ways to know what's going on. You can see that brightness button at the back of the base station along with other connections. And another thing of interest here is there are 3 cables to connect the Roccat Torch up. One single small one that goes from the base station to the microphone, and another one that goes directly to your computer. But there's also a third cable included, which will allow you to connect the microphone from a boom arm, so a longer one that goes between the mic and the base station. So you still need that base station connected somewhere on your desk, and that's handy because you then have easy access to it. Now the HyperX Quadcast by comparison has 2 RGB lighting zones, and what happens here is it's lit up as standard, and then when you tap the top of the microphone, which has a capacitive mute functionality, the RGB turns off, so that's how you know when it's muted. Now the Quadcast S is a really nice microphone for a number of reasons, one of which is the included shock mount. It's very rare to get a shock mount included as standard with your mic. That's really excellent to have this high quality shock mount system built into it. This means that it's really easy to remove knocks and things like that, and you'll have seen that it will come off of the stand as well, so you can keep it on there as you attach it to a boom arm. You can see these close-up shots of it showing just the high quality nature of the microphone setup and that shock mounting system. It's really clever and it's nice looking. I actually preferred the one on the original, which had the red cables instead of these grey ones. But this is still a nice looking bit of kit and really well thought out. And that's one thing that's great about the Quadcast, is the number of excellent, sensible and useful features that they've included in it. It has a shock mount, it has a built-in pop filter as well, and it has a number of other highlights. Obviously the RGB lighting is not only a nice touch to show off to your audience, but it's also a visible use case for when it's muted and not. Again, this has a USB-C connection that plugs into the rear and a 3.5mm jack that you can plug your headphones in for mic monitoring and audio pass-through. The Torch obviously doesn't have the same shock mount system that the Quadcast does, but that doesn't mean it should be dismissed, because it is also interestingly designed for other reasons. Obviously having all the controls in the base station makes it particularly useful when you're mounting it on a boom arm, because it means everything that you need to access is not on the microphone. So if you need to adjust anything in terms of the gain or muting or polar patterns or anything else that you're on, you're not actually touching the mic, and therefore you're not passing through sound by accidentally bumping into it and other things, which is actually very cleverly thought out. You have multiple controls on the there, and obviously USB-C connection again. You can adjust the brightness of the lighting, and you can tweak all sorts of other things, including the gain, polar patterns and other things. So I think that's an interesting design here. The fact that it's also easily boom arm mountable makes both of them really nice. Now the HyperX Quadcast has a very soft touch gain wheel on the bottom, so you just turn this to adjust the volume up and down, how loud you are and how much sound it's capturing. I'm doing a video separately on how to optimize the sound of this microphone, how to get the best quality out of it, but basically what you need to do is turn the gain down as much as possible and get it close to your mouth, and that will then reduce the sound. But the thing about it is it's a very nice silent slider, so if you do find that you need to tweak it, you can do that without the sound passing through. And the capacitive mute function is obviously the same, though if you want to change polar patterns, obviously that's still going to knock through, but you're unlikely to want to do that. I'm using cardioid pickup pattern at the moment, which is basically when you talk into the front of the microphone, that's how it picks up your voice, but you have the option to select between different polar patterns if you want to capture all around. However, if you're trying to block out a lot of background noise, then that's the polar pattern to go for, but it means it can be used for multiple things. So if you're podcasting with multiple people in the room, for example, or doing an interview, then you might want to capture from different directions. So it's very flexible. Built-in pop filter and other things are an interesting highlight. And when you get really close and just look at the detail and the quality of this microphone, it belies the price, I think. It looks like a much more premium microphone. You might think that the RGB perhaps takes away from the effect. Obviously, that is a personal preference whether you're going to like this or not, but I think it really looks the part. It looks fantastic and adds a really nice quality to it that's unmistakable and are really easy to identify. Obviously, side by side, the two look very different and they're both very easy to spy. You can obviously see the big difference between them. However, they're both wonderful microphones, both offer superb capture for a USB mic, both have a wonderful setup of features and other things. Now, I've already said how easy it is to boom arm mount these. The Torch is particularly easy because it basically comes away from the base station and then can easily be installed. It has a threading system that will easily install on a variety of boom arms. You can see Elgato's wave arm here, which I've done a video on separately, but I'm also using it on the Rode PSA 1 Plus that I'll show you, and you usually have an adapter included in the box with those sorts of boom arms that you can thread this onto. Now, both mics are really easy to get onto a boom arm, but the Torch is much easier because it just basically unscrews from the base and then screws onto the boom arm with relative ease, whereas the Quadcast requires a bit more convincing in order to come off. But once you've got it off that stand, then you can pop it onto the boom arm. Now, you do need an adapter for doing this, and it's also important to note when you're taking it off the stand that there are various bits that come off. You can see them popping off in my hands. So you have the rings, you have a clip on the other side, and you obviously have the screw system that holds that in place. Be very careful not to lose any of those things, because if you ever need to put it back on the stand, then it's going to be a problem. And I've had a lot of people in previous videos comment about losing them and asking where they can get them. You get an adapter included in the box that you can see me attaching here, which basically takes the place of the standard stand, and you put the whole thing back together using the same screw system and mounting thread that it came with when it was on the stand, and then you just screw that into the adapter. That adapter then allows you to install it on a boom arm, so the setup there is really straightforward. Here I'm using it on the Blue Compass. Once again, I've obviously also used it on the PSA 1 Plus. Now, I have heard from some people that the Blue Compass can't handle the Quadcast. Those people are wrong, so if you hear that, don't listen to them. You can do it quite easily. The Blue Compass does need some adjusting. There's a tensioning screw in the bottom of the base and also some on each of the points of the arm as well. This is one of the best boom arms that I've used, and I'm still using it now. Highly recommended, and it's perfectly suitable for this microphone as well. So now I'm going to go into the mic tests and show you the difference between the quality of these two mics. So, if you guessed that I was using the Quadcast for the voiceover at the beginning of this video, you were correct, because here I am now with it, and this is how it has been the whole time on the Rode PSA 1 Plus, and I've been doing the voiceover for that. But in a minute, I'll show you what the Torch is like. Now, this is set with the cardioid pickup pattern, as I said, so I'm talking into the front of it, which is essentially here where the HyperX logo is, and I also have it adjusted probably down to quite a minimum amount of gain, so it isn't picking up too much background noise. But one thing I have noted, and you might have heard, is there are some clicks from my mouse and also a little bit of external noise. I could tweak it a little bit more, and as I said, I'm going to do a video to show you separately on that as well. But you can hear that it does pick up certain things. So if I've got my scuff controller here, for example, it does pick up some of that noise. But what I want to demonstrate is if I put this behind, you can't hear that nearly as much as you could when it was in front. So obviously the sound changes depending on where you're talking into it. So if I'm round the back here, you can't really hear it. Obviously that is going to vary depending on the pickup pattern, because if you switch between the pickup patterns, you'll notice quite a difference in the soundscape. So there's various different ones. So you can see this mode, for example, you can talk in it from different angles, and the sound then moves around depending on where you're talking into it. And then obviously you also have a variety of other modes. So if we switch all the way across here, now I can talk from basically any direction. And this one is the omnidirectional. There's quite a lot of different sounds there. But obviously there's noticeable sounds when you're changing polar patterns, which isn't ideal. But the good thing is, as you can see there, you can't hear when I mute it, as long as you're gentle and don't thump it. You can just do a gentle tap on there and easily be muted without any fuss. So, a very nice microphone, wonderful capture quality, and just for quick demonstration purposes, I'm just going to do a bit of typing on a keyboard. Obviously the keyboard is slightly over here, so it's not quite in the same place, and see it's barely picking it up. Now I can turn the gain down a bit more. If you turn it all the way down, now obviously you can't hear me as well, but you also can't hear as much of the typing. There are other things that you can do to adjust that, but finding the sweet spot for your environment, your room, surrounding noise and other things is obviously a personal sort of tweaking that you have to do to the microphone once you've got it. But still, fantastic capture quality. And now onto the Roccat Torch. So here I am with the Roccat Torch on the boom arm, and you'll see it has like a green effect on it at the moment, and that's the cardioid pickup pattern. And you'll also notice, as I said earlier, that this adjusts depending on how much gain you've got applied to it. So if I turn it up and down, you can see that changing. One of the good things about this is visually easy to see when it's muted, but also what mode you're on. So it's really easy to see that. You can hear the sound quality of it as well. It does a great job picking up sound, but also eliminating some of the background noise. And again, it's the same sort of tweaking logic that you have to do, where you have to mess around with the gain to get it right. One thing I don't like about this microphone is, although it has a 3.5mm jack on it, you can't mic monitor through it for some reason. So I've got this 3.5mm headset connected up to the base station, but I'm not hearing the audio through the microphone. So there's no mic monitoring, which is very odd, very strange thing to do. So I can't hear myself right now, which is a real problem if using a closed back headset. This is not an issue with the Quadcast, so it's worth bearing that in mind. What I do like though is that there are other modes. So if I switch into this mode, for example, you can hear the sound changes depending on when you're talking into it. So this is actually a stereo mode, or essentially it changes direction. It's really interesting. What is interesting is there's also a whisper mode. So this is an extra mode on the microphone that's designed to like have ASMR style, so you can talk a bit quieter. This is like a pickup pattern designed specifically for ASMR, which is pretty unusual, but I think it does a really good job of capturing that sort of sound. I'm not really into ASMR personally, but if you are, then this might be an option for you. And again, you can see that the colour has changed, so apparently Whisper is blue, a nice soothing blue. But for me, it would usually be the cardioid pickup pattern and the sound from that. Now, I do think that the Torch offers a really good capture. I'll leave it up to you to decide which of these is better, but I'm going to type in the background now as I'm talking, so you can see what you can hear from that. If you check out the review, I also show the difference between the sound pickup when it's on the desk versus on the boom arm, as well as some ways to improve the sound. So I'll link to that video in the description. Be sure to check out the Quadcast and Quadcast S versus video and other information in the description as well. And if you've got this far in the video, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. Smash that subscribe button, hit the like button, and come back for more in future. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.